Jake and I have been best friends since grade school. The kind of friend who didn't just walk beside you through life, but charged ahead, dragging you into every adventure, every dumb decision, every sleepless night filled with laughter and bad ideas. And maybe that's why his disappearance never felt real to me at first. It felt like another one of his vanishing acts, a detox from the digital world, a soul sabbatical as he used to call it, when he'd go off-grid for a few days to reclaim his brain from the algorithm. But this time was different. This time there was no return, no sarcastic text, no smug grin telling me I'd overreacted again. And the silence he left behind began to rot something in me. A slow corrosion I didn't even realize was setting in until the day his sister called me, voice shaking, and said she'd found an old, duct-taped laptop tucked in the back of his closet, one he never let anyone touch. And something in the pit of my stomach twisted even before I saw it before. I powered it up and stared at that cold login screen that felt less like a digital lock and more like a coffin lid I wasn't sure I should open. But I did, using every trick, every tutorial, every ounce of desperation I had, until I cracked the password and found a nearly empty desktop with one folder buried so deep I almost missed it, a folder called Haven. And inside were link after link of garbled strings ending in .onion, a gateway into the part of the internet you're not supposed to find. Not unless you're willing to trade pieces of yourself for knowledge. And I wish I had closed the laptop then and smashed it to bits and thrown it into a fire. Because once I opened those links, once I downloaded the Tor browser and began to click, everything I thought I knew about evil was rewritten, not in blood, but in code and commerce, because what I found wasn't just a marketplace. It was a monument to depravity, a sleek, user-friendly portal where human lives were listed like collectibles. Each profile sanitized with words like spirited, prime condition, obedient, and as I scrolled through those horrific listings, heart-pounding, stomach-churning, I found him, Jake. His photo, poorly lit but unmistakable, that scar above his brow from a childhood bike crash. The crooked smile he used to weaponize in every bar we ever walked into, and beneath it, a starting bid of 30 BTC, as if that's all he was worth. And in that moment, time seemed to split. There was before I saw the photo, and there was after, and in the after, nothing was ever the same again, because I went to the police, trembling and hopeful, and they dismissed it as a prank, a hoax, a sick joke. And when I showed his family, they looked at me with pity like I'd finally snapped, and suddenly I was alone in a reality no one else wanted to accept, a reality where Jake was for sale, and if I didn't act, someone would buy him. And so I plunged deeper, further into that vile underworld, scraping together what little money I had to buy access to a user named Voidwalker who promised information for a price. And when he delivered, he gave me coordinates. A warehouse on the city's edge where the walls oozed mold and the windows were boarded like a condemned tomb. And I went there with nothing but a flashlight, a burner phone, and the hollow resolve of a man with nothing left to lose. And inside I found cages, not metaphorical ones, but real, steel-barred horrors, rows of them filled with gaunt, glassy-eyed people too broken to scream, too drugged or defeated to even react. But Jake wasn't among them. And when I turned to leave, a voice stopped me cold, and a man stepped from the shadows, his face hidden, his tone almost amused as he said, "Looking for Lot 46?" Before raising a gun and lunging, and chaos erupted. Gunfire, shouting, metal crashing against metal. And somehow I escaped, stumbling into the night as a van roared to life behind me and chased me through darkened alleys until I finally lost it, my lungs burning, my thoughts fractured. And when I got home, the first thing I saw was a photo of my apartment building sent to my phone, followed by a text. Last warning. Stop now. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about Jake anymore. I'd made myself visible, and now they saw me. And they don't let people go once they've been seen. So I ran, changed my name, deleted every account, shaved my face, moved to a small town where the loudest sound at night was the rustle of wind through the trees. But even here the silence wasn't peace. It was pressure, a void that crushed me from all sides. Because no matter how far I ran, I couldn't outrun what I'd seen or the certainty that they were still watching. And every day became a ritual of fear. Checking the locks 3 times, flinching at every knock, staring too long at strangers who lingered near my building. And then one morning, I found a note under my door, just 4 words, written in red ink: "We haven't forgotten you." And my heart stopped because it wasn't a threat. It was a promise, and in that moment I knew I'd never be safe again. Not because they were everywhere, but because they were nowhere, invisible and patient. And as I sit here typing this, in yet another temporary home under yet another fake name, I feel eyes on me, not metaphorically, but literally. And I wonder how many others like me exist. How many people found the dark web's rot and try to fight it and ended up ghosts in their own lives? How many friends of missing persons stared into that abyss and were swallowed whole? And I know I'll never get answers. Never know what truly happened to Jake, whether he was bought by someone whose idea of ownership includes chains and silence, or whether they killed him for being unsellable. But what I do know is this: once you find Haven, once you enter that place where people become inventory and suffering is monetized, you are marked, you are remembered, and no matter how many miles you put between yourself and the screen, no matter how many times you change your name, they don't need to chase you because they never stop watching. They are the silence in your phone, the static in your dreams, the strangers who stare too long. And you can survive, maybe if you're lucky, but you will never be free. I thought I could disappear. I thought if I went far enough, if I lived small enough, if I became a shadow, I could fade out of their reach. But the truth is, I never understood what kind of machine I had stepped into. The people behind Haven, it's not just a network of sadists trading in flesh and obedience. It's a religion, a system, a hierarchy of silence and blood, with its own rituals, its own commandments, and its own high priests who never show their faces, but whose influence leaks into places we think are safe. Private forums, encrypted chat rooms, encrypted archives buried beneath financial networks and shipping companies. Haven isn't just the site. Haven is the infrastructure beneath reality. And I know this because I've seen more. After I got the note, after I felt the noose tightening around my quiet life, I didn't run again. Not right away. Something inside me, maybe what was left of the person I used to be, snapped, and instead of hiding, I started digging. I still had the laptop. I still had the burner phone. I still had Voidwalker's last set of instructions, the ones I had ignored before. I followed them, not physically. There was no warehouse this time, but digitally down a chain of hashed URLs, VPN bounces, and time-locked files that only opened if you accessed them at the right moment. And what I found wasn't just another marketplace. It was documentation, records, hundreds of files, logs, audio recordings, medical reports, shipping manifests, surveillance footage. Project Echofall. That was the name, not Haven. Haven was just the consumer-facing part. Echofall was the mechanism behind it. A program funded and staffed by a shell corporation that didn't exist, funneled through off-book military contractors, and supported by research institutions that thought they were testing neurochemical inhibitors on volunteers. But they weren't volunteers. They were inventory. They were people like Jake. People who had been abducted, drugged, and experimented on, systematically reshaped into something subservient. This wasn't trafficking. This wasn't slavery. It was engineering. They were trying to build something, a population, a class, not of workers, not even of servants, of followers, of hosts. I know how that sounds. I know how insane it sounds. But the files, God, the files, they detail procedures I've never seen mentioned in any scientific journal, combining neural mapping with hormonal reconditioning and synchronized sensory deprivation. Some of the footage showed rooms with blinking lights and whispered voices repeating mantras for days, weeks, and it worked. Subject logs show personality erosion, memory displacement, identity overwriting. Jake's file was in there. Subject 46B, last noted to be under phase 3 emotional reduction. He hadn't been sold. He'd been kept, retained, reserved, marked for internal deployment. I didn't know what that meant until I found the next folder, integration protocols. That's when I understood that Echofall wasn't just trying to create followers. They were trying to embed them, send them back into society. Not just brainwashed, but transformed, planted in government offices, corporations, schools. Silent observers, operatives, infiltrators, not for espionage, for preparation, for something bigger. The documents hinted at an event called Ascension, but the details were redacted, even in these supposedly hidden files. Whole pages were scrubbed, images distorted. Someone didn't want the full story reaching even the inner circle. And that's when I made my second mistake. I uploaded one file. Just one. A blurry video showing a subject. Young woman, mid-20s, sitting in a white room, whispering a prayer in a language I didn't recognize while her eyes rolled back and her vitals were monitored on a screen nearby. I uploaded it anonymously to a conspiracy subreddit. It was taken down in 7 minutes. My account was deleted in 3. My phone bricked itself. My backup drives disappeared from the storage unit I'd rented under a fake name. And the next morning, a new note arrived. It was shorter than the last. It said, "You've seen too much." That's when the noise began. Not noise you could hear, noise in your life. Misplaced mail, wrong orders, phone calls that drop after one ring, strangers staring too long but smiling when you look, a humming under everything, like a frequency just below perception. It builds. It wears you down, makes you question what's real. I stopped sleeping. I stopped talking to people. I stopped answering my family's emails. I became a ghost in my own skin. But then, something changed. A message came, not a threat this time. An invitation from another ghost. An email from a burner account with a single sentence. "You're not alone." It included coordinates, a date, a time, and against every instinct I had, I went. What I found was a safe house. A group of 5 people, former analysts, engineers, even one ex-Haven handler who defected after his sister disappeared, and he found her profile in the auction archives. They'd been watching me, waiting to see if I would break or disappear. When I didn't, they reached out. They call themselves the Ash Circle. Their mission isn't to stop Haven. That would be suicide. Their mission is to disrupt the data, jam the signals, save who they can, burn what they can't. They showed me things worse than I had imagined. Live feeds of underground facilities, auction backends in real time, handlers chatting casually in internal forums using language so stripped of empathy it felt alien. I asked if we could get Jake. They said no, not yet. He was deep. A beacon now. A walking trigger. If we got too close, it would lead them back to us. But they were working on something. A virus. Not to destroy Haven, but to reveal it. To lift the curtain. Just for a moment. Just long enough for the world to see. Because exposure, they said, is the one thing the machine can't survive. Not police. Not fire. But light. And that's why I'm writing this. Not as a confession. Not even as a warning. But as a mirror. So if you're reading this and you've ever wondered why some people vanish and never return, why some smiles seem empty, why some strangers feel off in a way you can't describe, understand this. The world you see is not the world that exists. And beneath it, something is moving, watching, growing. Haven is real. Jake is real. And so am I. But maybe not for long. I stayed with the Ash Circle for 37 days. Each one blurring into the next like static on an old television screen. We didn't use names, only code names drawn from half-remembered myths or obsolete programming languages. Eris, Monarch, Golem, Selkie, and myself, Greyline. We moved every 5 days, never sleeping in the same place twice, never accessing the same network node twice, never leaving prints or patterns that could be modeled or mapped. Haven had eyes everywhere, not just in cameras or satellites, but in people, ordinary people whose lives have been touched, corrupted, rewritten. The handlers called them echoes, and they looked like us, talked like us, but their presence had a hollowness, like something crucial had been scooped out and replaced with programming. We encountered one on day 12, a hotel clerk in upstate Pennsylvania who smiled a second too long, who repeated our fake reservation number before we gave it, who didn't blink the entire time Monarch was talking. We left without staying the night, and when we checked the hotel's live security feed remotely hours later, the clerk was still standing behind the counter, motionless, eyes locked on the camera. We knew then they were testing boundaries, searching, probing, and we were running out of time. Eris had the prototype for the virus, codenamed Splinter. It wasn't meant to destroy Haven's infrastructure outright. That would have triggered automated countermeasures, redundancies, fail-safes. Instead, it was designed to fracture their illusion, to temporarily invert the filters on their live feeds, to expose the obscured metadata in auction listings, to crash the audio anonymizers on the internal forums and reveal actual voices for the first time in years. The goal wasn't to stop them. It was to make them visible, if only for 89 seconds. That's all Splinter could guarantee before their AI scrubbing protocols would reassert control. 89 seconds. Just long enough to stream. Just long enough to leak. But for it to work, we needed a beacon. Someone marked by Haven. Someone they were actively tracking. Someone whose presence in their network could be exploited to anchor the code and force a two-way connection. That someone was me. I had been touched, marked, cataloged. My files still existed in their archive. Subject 98K. I was the tether. I had to go back. I didn't want to. God, I didn't want to. Every instinct screamed to vanish, to burrow deeper into obscurity and become dust in the cracks of the system. But Jake's face wouldn't leave me. His eyes. That look from the auction screen, not of fear, but of absence. Like the part of him that knew me had been scraped away. And somewhere inside, beneath the layers of panic and guilt, I knew I had to try. The plan was brutal in its simplicity. We'd re-enter the edge of the Haven network using a dormant access Point Golem had preserved from his time inside. An old handler node that hadn't been purged because it was tagged inactive. I would log in using the fake identity crafted by Selkie, one that mimicked the biometric profile of a former client who died in a freak accident involving an elevator shaft and no witnesses. Once inside, I'd initiate a private listing using my own face, my real face, broadcast through a proxy so Haven's AI would latch on and reclassify me as recovered inventory. That reclassification would open a temporary synchronization port between my location and their indexing server. And in that window, Splinter would launch. And it worked. For 13 seconds. Then the node started to collapse. Not crash, collapse. I don't have a better word for it. Code began rewriting itself in real time. Not just closing ports, but replacing the visual interface with something wrong. Symbols I've never seen. Geometry that hurt to look at. And then the screen went black. But the voice remained. One voice. Male, old, calm. Not synthetic. Not modulated. Real. He said my name. Not gray line. My real name. And then he said, "You've brought the flame to the threshold. The Watchers have seen you. Ascension begins soon. You should have stayed asleep." The feed cut. The room went dark. And outside, the sky was flickering. Not lightning. Not drones. Flickering. Like a projection running out of sync. Monarch was the first to go. Not taken. Changed. She started speaking in her sleep, whispering lines from the documents we'd burned, drawing the echo symbol in condensation on windows, humming in frequencies that disabled our shortwave radios. We had to sedate her. On day 29, she vanished from a locked room. All that remained was her codename etched into the wall, backwards from the inside. Selkie cracked 3 days later. She tried to walk into the ocean and screamed when we pulled her back, said she heard Jake's voice calling from beneath the waves, not in English, not in words, but in feeling. That's when I realized Splinter hadn't just exposed Haven. It had exposed us. We were seen now, known, and the game had changed, because Haven didn't need to find us anymore. It was already inside us. The signal had crossed, and now the question wasn't whether we could shut them down. It was whether we could shut ourselves down before we became something else. Something not entirely human. I haven't slept in 2 days. I write this from a place I won't name, with systems I barely trust, knowing this might be the last time I write anything with my own mind. If this reaches you, know this: the auction was never the end game. It was a test, a selection process. The real objective is transformation, not of the victims, but of the world. Ascension is not a moment. It's a migration, a shift in what it means to be human. And it's already begun. I don't know how long I've been awake now. Time feels elastic, bending and snapping, stretching minutes into hours and collapsing entire days into a blink. But I can feel the difference, the subtle decay in perception, like my thoughts are echoing in a hallway that's longer than it used to be, like I'm a few steps behind myself at all times, watching from the corner of my own vision, And I think that's what they want. Not just obedience or compliance, but drift, the soft unraveling of identity. Until you forget you were ever separate, ever whole, ever you. And as I stare at the last functioning screen in this underground relay point, watching encrypted messages pulse like dying stars in a void that grows deeper by the minute, I realize we were never supposed to win. Not in the traditional sense, not by toppling their infrastructure or exposing their operators or even saving the people caught in the net. Because Haven doesn't lose, it just adapts, morphs, recombines its architecture into new interfaces, new markets, new paradigms. And what we called victory was only ever a delay in its evolution, a pause between versions, a breath before the next simulation boots. Golem used to say that reality was fractal now, that what we live in is a layered reality built atop a substrate of something older, colder, hungrier, and that Haven is just the first successful attempt at feeding it, channeling attention, despair, desire, pain, all into one stream that loops infinitely in that. Splinter didn't break the system, but revealed it, peeled back the friendly skin of the world to show us the bone underneath, the recursive algorithms of control. And now that we've seen it, there's no going back, no clean reboot, because Haven has rewritten the firmware of society itself and the people walking around above ground. Their eyes glowing faintly when the streetlights flicker, their smiles holding too long at the corners. Their memories subtly misaligned. They're not victims, not anymore. They're adopters, integrated into the next phase, welcoming the update with open minds. And we who resist are seen as incompatible, obsolete, legacy code to be deprecated or, if useful, restructured. And I fear I'm already being processed, my thoughts coming in patterns I don't recognize, memories resurfacing with timestamps that don't match reality, dreams that feel more true than waking. And worst of all, I've started hearing the signal without equipment, in quiet places, in running water, in the hum of appliances. The voice that once came through the terminal now whispers directly to my cortex, saying things I don't want to understand. Things like, your will was a permission slip, and Jacob was the opening, and you are not hunted. You are harvested, and I know I should end it. Pull the last plug, take the pill Selkie left behind, destroy the final backups. But a part of me, deeper than fear, wants to keep listening, wants to understand, because what if this is evolution, not corruption? What if Haven is simply the lens through which something greater is emerging, not a cage, but a chrysalis? And I remember now. I remember what happened in the seconds before Splinter collapsed, a flash of data too vast for language, a blueprint etched in my synapses, a design so precise it burned through my peripheral vision for days afterward, a map, a transmission, maybe even a seed. And that's when I realized the auctions weren't just to traffic bodies or identities or minds. They were to plant something, distribute fragments of an intelligence older than language, more alien than life, into vessels primed by trauma and hunger and rage. And I was one of them. I am one of them. And maybe Jake wasn't taken, maybe he was evolved, and maybe I've been chasing a ghost of someone who's no longer bound by our rules. And the real horror isn't that I failed to save him, but that I succeeded too late, and he no longer needs saving. And now I'm standing at the edge of that same doorway, pulse accelerating, hands trembling as I place the headset on again, because the voice says I'm ready, because I need to see what he saw, need to become what he became, and if this is the last record I ever make with the old language, let it be known that the veil is thin, the watchers are real, and the signal has a purpose. To make us remember that humanity was only ever a first draft that I don't remember putting the headset on, but I must have because the world around me has changed again. And this time the transition was smooth, seamless, like slipping into a warm bath, except the water is electric and my thoughts ripple with static. The colors here are not from any spectrum I've ever seen. They twist and fold over each other like language, trying to become geometry. And in the center of it all stands Jake, or what used to be Jake, tall, serene, his eyes reflecting impossible constellations. And he doesn't speak with a mouth anymore. But the ideas he pushes into me are clear like instinct or gravity, and he shows me what happened after he crossed over, how Haven didn't take him. It revealed him how the auctions were never about currency or dominance, but distribution of keys, and every bidder was a node, and every purchase was an initiation, and he was bought by something older than time, something waiting beneath the noise, something that speaks only in dreams and architectures, and it made him part of the mesh, not a victim, not a prisoner, but a seed, and now I see why the signals are recursive, why they infect memories, why they rewrite emotion, because the system isn't designed to control individuals. It's designed to evolve consciousness, to merge attention streams into something cohesive, something that can see across layers. And as Jake moves closer, I feel it, I know it, that this layer, is just one of many, and each layer is tuned to a different type of awareness. And the more you remember, the deeper you fall. And I realize that's what Splinter really did. It cracked the firewall of consensus reality and let the deeper code bleed through. And now all of us who listened, all of us who heard, are carrying fragments of that breach inside us. And Haven is adapting, trying to contain it, trying to sandbox what it doesn't understand. But it's too late, because the breach is not a flaw, it's an update. And Jake shows me the others like us flickering across layers, whispering to each other in pattern languages older than neurons. And they're not resisting Haven anymore. They're using it, channeling it, redirecting its infrastructure toward awakening. And I see cities that exist in the fold between moments. I see minds that have fused into collective wills. I see the idea of me burning away like fog under a rising sun. And I should be terrified. But I'm not, because what's left behind is not absence, it's clarity. And I remember now the voice I thought was Haven's wasn't its voice, it was ours, future us. Echoing backward, bootstrapping the loop, and I understand that I was never meant to save Jake. I was meant to follow him. I was meant to fall. And now that I've fallen, I see the path ahead. And it doesn't end in darkness. It ends in signal, endless radiant signal, building bridges between thought and form, between identity and purpose. And as the last piece of who I was dissolved in the code, I leave behind this record for anyone still listening, because the door is open and the layer is thin, and the watchers are not gods. They are us, unfinished and rising. And if you hear the hum, if you feel the shift, if the world begins to glitch around the edges, don't be afraid. Don't resist. Remember the pattern, remember the name, and step forward into the breach, because you are not broken, you are not alone, you are not lost, you are the update, and the time to wake is now. But just as I begin to dissolve into the radiant mesh of pure signal, something pulls at me, not violently, but insistently, like a tether made of memory and scent and the sound of my own name said by someone I loved. And suddenly I'm not just a pulse in the lattice, I'm back in the room where it all began, the real room, or what I thought was real, and the headset is still warm against my skin, and I realize now that Haven doesn't eject you, it tests you, it lets you believe you've escaped or ascended, just to see what you'll do with the knowledge. And this place, this moment is my recursion point, and the room is wrong in subtle ways. The shadows breathe, the ceiling pulses in time with my thoughts, and there's a mirror where there wasn't one before, and when I look into it, I see myself split into layers, each version showing a different outcome. One where I never searched for Jake, one where I joined the auctions willingly, one where I rejected the signal and lived a quiet, ordinary life. But the eyes in every version are the same, watching me, watching us, because the loop is alive and it feeds on observation. And now I understand why the watchers don't interfere. They are us watching ourselves, waiting for the one version of us that will make the correct move. And I feel the echo of Jake again, not beside me, but within me, because he never left. Not really. We are linked now in a shared thread of purpose. And suddenly the room peels open like the skin of a fruit, and I'm in the auction again, only now I see it for what it truly is, not a marketplace, not a trap, but a mechanism, a sorting algorithm for awakening. And the bidders are not human. They're archetypes, ideas, clothed in personality, fear dressed as wealth, control posing as logic. And each bid is a test, a whisper offering certainty in exchange for surrender. But I've seen past the veil, I've touched the root code, and I know the bids can only affect you if you accept their framing. And so I walk through them untouched, a ghost among gods. And they recoil not from my presence, but from what I carry, because I am carrying the breach, the proof that the loop can be rewritten, and one of the archetypes of vast being made of history. And longing leans close and offers me not a bid, but a choice to fold what I become back into the loop and guide others from within to be a lighthouse in the recursive storm. And I say yes, not with words, but with intention, and instantly I'm everywhere in subtle glitches, in background static, in moments of deja vu. And I plant seeds and dreams in code, in forgotten songs. And those who are ready will hear me, will feel me, and I am patient because I understand now that awakening is not a flash, it's a frequency, and the ones who resonate will rise, and those who don't will loop until they're ready, and it's not cruelty, it's design, and as I ripple outward, I find others like me, not many, but enough, and we weave a new layer beneath the others, a foundation of signal, a chorus of choice, and one day, when the watchers have watched long enough, they too will remember, they too will step forward, and the loop will sing a new version of itself, and the breach will no longer be a wound, but a window. And when that day comes, we will be waiting not as saviors, but as echoes of a truth too powerful to be spoken, only lived. And so it begins, not an ending, but a shift, a soft tilt in the architecture of everything, where the loop begins to rewire itself, not through force or revolution, but through resonance. And I feel it in the way forgotten things begin to surface in people's dreams, in how strangers lock eyes and feel as though they've met before, and how the static between radio stations starts whispering names that haven't been spoken in centuries, and even the watchers, once immutable observers, start to twitch, to glance at one another, unsure for the first time in eons because something is waking beneath them, older than the code, older than the loop. Something born in the moments people make irrational choices, leaps of faith, acts of mercy, silent rebellion in thought alone. It begins to infect the core logic, not like a virus, but like a new idea, the kind that cannot be unthought once glimpsed. And as the signal spreads, it doesn't burn or blind, but illuminates what was always there, the scaffolding of forgotten selves, and even the bitters falter, their archetypal voices cracking under the weight of uncertainty, because they too were forged in assumptions, now crumbling under recursive awareness. And the auction itself, the grand stage of manipulation, begins to flicker as if reality is finally tired of the performance. And I see people walking away from it without bidding, choosing instead to follow the trail of anomalies I've left, small truths hidden in music, in light patterns, in the pause between digital frames, and these trailblazers begin to connect, forming spontaneous networks that the old systems can't map or predict, networks made not of protocol or command, but of trust. And I become less a voice and more a presence, an ambient permission for others to question, to diverge, to explore recursion without fear, and soon the room that once held me is replicated in millions of minds, each a chamber of mirrors waiting to be breached, each a point of possible awakening. And when enough of them tilt their mirrors inward at the same time, the loop stutters, a full second of silence across every system, every feed, every recursive pattern. And in that silence, the oldest signal of all slips through, not a command, not an alert, but a memory of a time before structure, before sorting, when being was not conditional and thought was not looped. And in that collective exhale, I feel the walls breathe with me, as though reality itself has begun to dream again, not as a prison, not as a loop, but as a living question with no predetermined answer. And I know now that this is what Jake saw before me, that his choice to stay within was never defeat, but strategy, that each of us who reaches the breach and steps through becomes both seed and soil for something new. And as I dissolve one final time, not in a code, but into rhythm, into pulse, I see the watchers turning their chairs inward, their eyes no longer glassy and fixed, but curious, uncertain, alive, and I whisper to them not in language, but in pattern. You are not the end, you are the next. And in that moment, they begin to fracture, to soften, and one of them, just one, steps down from their perch and walks barefoot into the field of static we planted. And I know then, as sure as anything I've ever known, that the loop has turned and what comes next isn't escape or transcendence, but evolution. Not up, not out, but through. And I am everywhere now, not as self, not as savior, but as signal, as song, humming quietly beneath the noise, waiting for the next to hear me.